Bart and Jen from Mills back with us today. Their movie review, and this time they saw She Said, and I've heard so much about this, and we think of the Harvey Weinstein case. I get the sense it's a little less about the case itself, but those two journalists who were trying to get information about it, and everybody was being quiet about it, right?
Yeah, this is really the story about the two journalists, Jodi Kantor and Megan Twohey. They were reporters for the New York Times. They, started working on this story, spent months and months, was 18 months total investigating this. So really, it's booked right now as a Me Too movie, and it certainly is, because this was the genesis. Harvey Weinstein, of course, for people who don't know, was a famous producer in Hollywood and a horrible human being and a lech. And so he had victimized a whole lot of women. The stories were going around about him for ages. Everybody knew what was happening, but nobody did anything about it. And these two reporters spent months and months doing the due diligence of getting the story together, getting the resources, getting everybody to go on the record for it. And so this is really as much a newspaper procedural as it is anything else.
Yeah, Jennifer, he brought up a good point about the fact that Harvey Weinstein's axe went so far back. And when this story broke, we were like, well, wait a minute, it's been going on for 10, 15, 20 years. Why has nobody said anything? I got to assume you root for these reporters because they are just between a rock and a hard place, right?
Oh, you root for the reporters. You are really rooting for these victims. For anyone that listened to Rowan Farrell. Yeah, the podcast or read the book Catch and Release. He played audio clips of recordings that he had with these victims, and it is heart-wrenching to hear these stories. And they played some of them in this movie, and it's just horrific. I mean, this man was a full-blown predator. He's a rapist. He was just bullying and coercing women for decades, and it just went on. People turned a blind eye to it. They like some of his assistants would be given tips. Don't sit on the couch next to him. Wear extra clothing so it's harder for him to try to get under your skirt or in your shirt, what have you. It was terrible.
Yeah, just a horrible human being. Bart, you have an interesting perspective from this. You worked for a newspaper. Did any of this stand out when these reporters were going out and you thought, I see what they're doing there?
Well, I think it's, from a newspaper perspective, I like newspaper movies. And we discussed this. I mean, how does this hold up to All the President's Men or Spotlight? And I don't think it's as good a movie as those two, because the inherent drama is a little bit lost because we know the story and it's fairly recent. But in terms of, now I worked for the Lima News, and back even when it was a bigger paper than it is today, we didn't have a staff to set aside 18 months to do a story. And so you watch these things and you always think,
whales and to interview a victim.
Yeah, you watch these stories and you think, well, but they don't show the people, the reporters are actually doing their day job while they're investigating other stories too. So unless we believe that there are reporters that are doing nothing but 18 months studying one story, that'd be great, but that's not really the case.
Yeah, that doesn't happen in small town media like that. Jennifer, the acting itself, were you impressed with those performances?
Well, I've always been a huge Carey Mulligan fan. I really love her. And the supporting cast on this was also amazing. Andre Braugher was he the publisher or an editor?
He's an editor.
Yeah, he's one of the editors. And Patricia Clarkson was also an editor, and she's fabulous. And the two leads were just really good.
Yeah, I saw somebody who said the guy that played Harvey Weinstein, obviously you hate the character, but they said he was really good, and I hate to admit that, but he was good as Weinstein. Did you guys find that?
Yeah, and there are some moments like that, because we don't see a Weinstein face on. So we see his back, we see his side. So it's that Darth Vader, we're just catching the glimpse of the villain thing. There are moments like that, and then there are moments where, like Ashley Judd, for instance, plays herself as one of the victims. It takes you out of the movie a little bit, from my perspective, because it illustrates the fact that these are really real people involved, and sometimes we see the real person, sometimes we don't. So it takes you out of that movie a touch. But the guy looks like him and sounds like him, and certainly he was perfectly cast for it.
You guys mentioned it's not as good as some of those other big time media movies we've seen. Do you still recommend it?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I think it's a good watch. It's again, it's a little dry, but it's fairly quick. It's certainly not the 3 hours and something that Tar was, which is a superior movie. But this is it's a good movie, and it's an important subject to sort of catch up on. And this is easier than reading a book.
Indeed, yeah, indeed it is. All right, thank you guys, appreciate it.
Thanks.
Nice chatting with you. We'll be back right after this.